A top focus on World 24/7 this Thursday morning, viewers. Now, in a fiery move, US President Donald Trump has slapped a 25% tariff on Indian goods. It's effective the 1st of August. He's calling India's trade barriers strenuous and obnoxious. Now, Trump has also announced an additional penalty targeting India's energy and defense ties with Russia. Now, despite praising PM Modi as a friend once again, Trump warned that New Delhi's high tariffs and BRICS alignment are in fact a threat to the American dollar. However, he's also hinted that talks remain underway. Meanwhile, India's Commerce Ministry says it's studying the impact and remains committed to a fair trade deal, as it has been consistently maintaining. Now, this escalation comes just weeks before US officials visit New Delhi for the next round of trade talks. Now, this report gets you more.
US President Donald Trump has said that Washington will impose a 25% tariff on all Indian exports to the US and a separate unspecified penalty, citing India's high trade barriers and continued purchases of oil and weapons from Russia. The tariffs are scheduled to take effect on August 1st, putting months of negotiations for a bilateral trade deal in jeopardy.
Prime Minister Modi is a friend of mine, but they don't do very much business in terms of business with us. They sell a lot to us, but we don't buy from them. You know why? Because the tariff is so high. They have one of the highest tariffs in the world. Now, they're willing to cut it very substantially, but we'll see what happens. We're talking to India now. We'll see what happens. It doesn't matter too much whether we have a deal or whether we charge them a certain tariff, but you'll know at the end of this week.
In another post, Trump stated, and I quote, "We have a massive trade deficit with India," unquote. Trump's move comes after a 90-day pause to negotiate individual deals, during which the US signed agreements with the UK, Japan, Indonesia, the Philippines and the European Union. India has pushed back. In a measured statement, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry said that the government is studying the implications of Trump's announcement and remains committed to securing a fair, balanced and mutually beneficial trade deal. Delhi also referenced India's recent comprehensive economic and trade agreement with the UK, underlining New Delhi's push for global trade partnerships on its own terms. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has repeatedly said that India will always prioritize its national interest and buy oil from whichever country offers the best price. With just a day to go for the August 1st deadline to expire, the world's two largest democracies are staring down a major trade rift. The question remains, can a trade deal still be salvaged in time? With Ridhima Kedia, NDTV World.
Meanwhile, NDTV Profits Rishabh Bhatnagar unpacks what long-term impacts could these new tariffs have on India's trade balance and its resilience on US markets.
Right, clearly a negotiating tactic that was coming in from Trump, made very clear from his comments that came in late last night. He said that this 25% plus tariff is because of India's presence in the BRICS grouping, as well as the trade deficit that India has. And he is in talks with India right now to figure out what the final tariff will be. That is what Trump has said. He said that by the end of this week, it will be clear what sort of tariffs India will be paying. So clearly a negotiating tactic. These 25% plus tariffs plus a penalty are not the final tariffs that India will have to pay, given that both countries are now back on the negotiating table. But what we've seen from the Commerce Ministry coming in is the fact that they have taken receipt of this note of these tariffs that have come in by Trump. They've said that they are studying the implications and that they remain committed to a BTA that is scheduled for the October fall deadline of this year. They've also said that they will protect the welfare of various segments of the society, like farmers, entrepreneurs, MSMEs, and they've said that they will take all steps necessary to secure India's national interest. And also, given the fact that there was a lot of red lines that were drawn in the UK FTA as well, they've they've referred to that and said that they will take steps necessary to protect national interest, like it was with the UK FTA. So that is the statement that is coming in from the Commerce Ministry. But from various quarters of the industry as well as exporters, there are concerns around these very high tariffs. Firstly, on FICCI, FICCI has, which is an industry body, one of the leading industry bodies here in India. They've said that they're deeply disappointed with these 25% tariffs, and they've said that this will have, and they hope that this will be a short-term phenomenon.
Staying with the story now, after Trump threatened to in fact impose 25% tariff and penalty on Indian exports, domestic equity benchmarks are set to open deep in the red on Thursday, just hours from now. In fact, Trump's move also comes as a surprise as New Delhi and Washington were holding substantial talks on a potential trade deal, leaving industrialists and economists concerned alike. Now, we're joined by market expert Mithali Nikore. Mithali, thank you so much for taking the time. What are you picking up first and foremost, and how are Indian markets expected to react to this?
No, I think today when markets open, we will start to see the impact of this announcement. I do expect a reduction in the market of, anywhere between 0.1 to 0.3 basis points that should be coming in. Of course, today is not the final day because today we still have a day for negotiations. So we can still remain hopeful today. But if no deal comes through, then it will have a larger impact across markets, macroeconomically.
Well, thank you so much for unpacking the latest there, Mithali. Moving on, but staying with Washington and US President Donald Trump, he's in fact now announced a deal with Pakistan and Islamabad to harness the oil reserves, announcing that he will in fact be choosing an oil company to lead this partnership shortly. Now, Trump has once again taunted India, New Delhi, and his good friend PM Modi, quipping that maybe he will sell oil to India someday, in a collaboration with Pakistan, that is. Now, that's a remark that comes amid heightened tensions between India and Pakistan after the dastardly Pahalgam attack. We stay with Washington and the US, where the Trump admin, in fact, has imposed sanctions on at least half a dozen Indian companies accused of trading in Iranian petroleum, in fact, and also petrochemicals as part of border action targeting 20 entities worldwide. 6 Indian entities have been targeted as a part of these 20 entities that have been targeted worldwide. Now, the US Department of State has announced the sanctions on Wednesday, alleging that Indian firms knowingly engaged in, quote, significant transactions, unquote, for the purchase and marketing of Iranian petroleum products, violating American sanctions on the country. Staying with Washington, where Senate Democrats are in fact invoking a nearly century-old rule to demand the release of the Jeffrey Epstein-related documents, or the Epstein files, as they are called, from the Department of Justice. Now, this push is led by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Democrats have in fact used the very obscure Rule of 5. Now, what's this Rule of 5? It compels agencies to release information if 5 committee members, in fact, request for it. They say the Trump administration has repeatedly failed to deliver transparency and are now, in fact, giving the DOJ only until the 15th of August to comply. The files, in fact, could shed new light on Epstein's ties to powerful figures, including Trump himself. Meanwhile, pressure is going across the aisle, with some Republicans also now breaking ranks and demanding answers. Meanwhile, Committee Chairman Schumer says the evasiveness is alarming, and he's also hinting at legal action if the request is in fact denied. We are joined by Daniel Block on more on this from New York. He's the senior editor of the Foreign Affairs magazine. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time. Now, what might be the political fallout if the Justice Department, or the Department of Justice, so it's called, continues to withhold these Epstein files, even under the bipartisan pressure we're seeing right now?
Well, I think the political fallout that Democrats are hoping for, and again, we don't know if this is going to happen, is that it'll divide the Republican coalition. So this is one of the rare issues where Republican voters are not in lockstep behind Trump. Some want the files to come out and are angry at the president for not facilitating that. Others are supportive of him. And so I think Democrats hope that by continuing to press this, they could peel off some Republican voters or lower Republican support for the president.
Daniel, what do you make of the many changing versions and statements coming out from President Trump? Only in the last week, we've once seen allegations coming out that he in fact met Melania at through Epstein at a party, and later he said Epstein was in fact stealing employees, young employees, as he said, from his Mar-a-Lago resort. How's it looking? How are the aesthetics looking for President Trump?
Well, I think the aesthetics for him are bad. There's a question as to what extent this is actually breaking through to normal American voters. Polling so far suggests that it may not be having a huge effect on his approval ratings. That could, of course, change. But I think the main thing a lot of people, myself included, are wondering is what is in the files that's made Trump so reluctant to release them. We don't know. And a lot of people want to find out.
Well, thank you so much for putting things into perspective. But all eyes, as Daniel correctly pointed out, are still on what exactly will these Epstein files reveal. Now, staying with the US, but shifting our focus to the Middle East, where Trump's top envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in fact traveling to Israel today to tackle the deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It's his first visit in months, and it comes as ceasefire as well as hostage talks remain stalled. Now, Witkoff is expected to meet PM Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu's top aides, and he may also visit Gaza aid centers directly. Now, the White House, in fact, has said that Trump wants first-hand updates to determine how to get more U.S. assistance to civilians. Meanwhile, talks with Hamas are still ongoing. However, Israeli officials say progress is unlikely. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Israel and the US are also exploring tougher alternatives, including a possible escalation or even greater partial annexation of Gaza if this deadlock continues. Well, it's time we slip into a short break, but on the other side, we get you more on why Canada is following France and the UK with a plan to recognize the Palestinian state at the UN this September. Stay tuned. Welcome back to World 24/7. Now we shift our focus to Canada, which has officially joined a growing list of Western nations, in fact, which are preparing to recognize the state of Palestine. PM Mark Carney says the move could very well be formalized at the UNGA in September, the next General Assembly, which is taking place in September, if the Palestinian Authority holds democratic elections in 2026, excluding terrorist organization Hamas. Now, this follows similar announcement made by France and the UK as global pressure amounts for a two-state solution to end the Israel-Palestine conflict. Meanwhile, countries like New Zealand and Australia may also follow suit after signing a joint declaration backing Palestinian statehood. But Israel has pushed back sharply, calling the move dangerous and hypocritical. With over 60,000 lives lost in Gaza since the war began, the diplomatic stakes at the UN are rising fast. Meanwhile, my colleague Maha Siddiqui joins us from Vancouver to break this story down. Maha, to begin with, will this lead, in a fresh fallout between Ottawa and Washington? Also, what impact might this collective recognition, as we are hearing, on the upcoming UNGA have?
So what we're observing at the moment right now is the G7 countries going forward and announcing their intention to recognize Palestinian statehood. And Canada becomes the third country in G7 after France and the United Kingdom to announce that intention of recognizing Palestine in the upcoming United Nations General Assembly in September. Now, we do know that the US has a totally different view on this at the moment as far as the two-state solution is concerned. And this was addressed by Prime Minister Mark Carney today in the press conference when he said that the only possible solution for peace in that region was a two-nation solution, which he says is now eroding before our eyes. And he also, when asked a question about whether it's a critique for Israel, said that facts were being changed on the ground through the statements, policies, and actions. And that is the reference to Israel over there. And that is why, out of necessity, this decision has been taken. And he believes that this is a collective decision as of now by countries from the G7 who are step by step coming forth and making this decision. And therefore, there is strength in that collective decision. So in some sense, giving us an idea of where Ottawa would be vis-a-vis Washington, D.C., which was your question with regards to this decision of Canada that was announced today, a big decision by Canada to recognize Palestinian statehood in the upcoming UNGA. But there are commitments they've sought from the Palestinian authorities that they will hold elections in 2026 without Hamas.
Well, thanks for getting us the latest. And clearly, new fault lines emerging in the ongoing Middle East conflict, as we've seen. But we shift our focus to Pakistan, where there's tragic news, in fact, coming in of German Olympic champion Laura Dahlmeier has died in a mountaineering accident on the Lela Peak at an altitude of 5,700 meters. Now, the 31-year-old former biathlon star was struck by falling rocks during a climb in the Karakoram mountain range. Her climbing partner survived, but rescue efforts were called off due to bad weather. Now, Dahlmeier made history at the 2018 Winter Olympics, winning 2 golds and a bronze in biathlon before retiring at the age of just 25. She was known for her humility and passion for the outdoors. Dahlmeier had requested, in fact, not to be recovered if lost in the mountains. Meanwhile, tributes are pouring in for the true champion with a heart of courage and a long vision. Meanwhile, a political firestorm is erupting after Donald Trump sanctions Brazil's top Supreme Court judge, Alexander de Moraes, accusing him of leading a witch hunt against Trump ally and former President Jair Bolsonaro. The U.S. Treasury says Moraes violated human rights through censorship and political trials, but Brazilian leaders across the political spectrum have condemned the move as foreign interference and a direct attack on democracy. In fact, President Lula's government is hitting back, calling the sanctions absurd and even dangerous. Even conservatives in Brazil say Trump has crossed the red line. And Portugal is facing a series of wildfires during another summer heatwave. Viewers, on Wednesday itself morning, 2 wildfires were considered of concern. In fact, with over 3,300 firefighters on the ground, 1,000 fire engines and 29 aerial resources. Portugal has been experiencing a heat wave in recent days with temperatures closer to 40 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, in the northern part of the country, close to the border with Spain, a fire that started Saturday night has been burning for several days now, threatening villages and the natural protected area of Gers. And thousands of fans are lined up the streets of Birmingham to honor Ozzy Osbourne. Yes, he's the legendary Black Sabbath frontman, as his funeral procession wound through his hometown Sharon. Kelly, Jack and Amy, his wife and children respectively, paid their respects at the funeral before heading to a private service. Meanwhile, can BCCI duck the national sentiments? Can legends bouncer for BCCI become babus? What's the confusion? There should be no cricket, in fact, with terror supporters. India is clear, but why is BCCI in doubt? Meanwhile, India's legends are leading the way. They've pulled out of the World Cricket League game. They're saying they will not play with Pakistan. And now the big question here is, will BCCI follow the legends' example? Here's more.
There are many reasons as to why. Many experts are saying that India can't just go and say no. Some argue that adhering to the Olympic Charter's principles might be beneficial for India's bid to host the 2036 Olympics. However, this shouldn't directly impact the Asia Cup decision since it is not an Olympic event. But what are these reasons that we are talking about? Number one is ACC and full member obligations. Remember, India is one of the 5 members of the Asian Cricket Council, along with Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. Full members, they are contractually obligated to participate in ACC events unless they are formally withdrawing. The ACC explicitly defines the Men's Asia Cup tournament to include automatic participation by full member teams, which places a binding on India to be a part of it. Number 2 is the hosting rights and responsibilities. Now, India holds the official hosting rights for the 2025 Asia Cup as per the ACC's invitation. Now, even if matches are shifted to neutral venues, in this particular case, it has been shifted to UAE due to political tensions, India still remains the formal host and hence it is expected to supply administrative as well as cricketing input. Number 3 is the broadcast and financial commitments. Remember, Sony Pictures Network India, it holds the broadcast rights worth approximately $170 million under an 8-year deal from 2024 onward. Another point is ACC revenue sharing model. It gives each full members 15% of broadcast revenue, with India withdrawing. That contract and all those contracts would need renegotiating, destabilizing ACC's financial model and hurting other board members' revenues as well. So a lot of responsibility hence falls on India in that particular sense. Number 4 is the precedents and geopolitical constraints. Remember, in 2023 and again in 2025, during the Champions Trophy, India refused to travel to Pakistan. Instead, a hybrid or neutral venue model was adopted, with India playing elsewhere, in this particular case, UAE. Now, similar arrangements are expected for Asia Cup if India does participate. Like I said, those matches will be taking place in UAE at the moment. Now, the Indian government's position and advice are decisive in these particular decisions, because BCCI has indicated that its stance will follow the government council. Now, another important part is the political leadership in ACC. The ACC is currently chaired by Mohsin Naqvi, the Pakistan's interior minister. He's also the head of the Pakistan Cricket Board. The BCCI, in fact, reportedly conveyed its withdrawal verbally to ACC, but a unilateral exit may provoke legal and governance disputes with ACC structures as well.
Now, with that, it's time we slip into a short break. News continues on the other side with my colleague Parmeshwar Baba.